Labor has committed to overhauling those whistleblowing and secrecy laws. For people who haven't been following that debate, why is it so imperative that the government gets on with that? What is at risk here if things don't change soon?
Because it's not just about journalist freedom. I mean, journalists are only as good as their sources. And if we're seeing whistleblowers being prosecuted, then it places it has a very chilling effect right across the industry. Look, let's think about David McBride for a moment. David blew the whistle on allegations of war crimes by Australian Special Forces in Afghanistan. Of all of the people that have been implicated in that, and we know that some trials are due to begin shortly, but the first person to be prosecuted in all of that whole scenario is the guy who blew the whistle, David McBride himself, who was due to go on trial for breaching national security legislation, not any of the alleged perpetrators. McBride is there because he published or helped release classified information, but nothing that was published actually damaged national security. And in fact, if anything, it helped improve the situation. It's forced us to have a really good look at the way in which special forces have operated. We've seen all sorts of proposals for reform of the special forces, and that can only be a positive thing. The whistleblowing in David's case did what it's supposed to do, and yet we're seeing David being prosecuted. Richard Boyle is the other prosecution that we're calling for an end to. Richard Boyle also exposed abuses by the Australian Tax Office in the Adelaide office. He showed the ways in which they were aggressively going after people who owed the ATO money. And again, as a result of his work, or his whistleblowing, we're seeing huge reforms right across the ATO, and yet again, he's being punished. These two men have suffered enormous stress. They've suffered, their careers have suffered. They've had to fork out hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. And if those kinds of prosecutions aren't chilling further whistleblowers or anybody who is thinking of coming forward to journalists, then I don't know what will. And if anything that disrupts that chain of disclosure, whether it's the whistleblowers or the journalists themselves, if that happens, if that chain of disclosure is disrupted, if we're seeing journalists and sources being prevented from publishing these kinds of stories, then it's not so much about the journalists themselves, it's about the public that depends on good journalism that is suffering. And I think that's where we need to recognise this has an impact. Yes, it chills good journalism and it chills journalist sources, but it does also have an impact a very serious impact on our democracy.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Plenty of room for improvement, no doubt about that. Peter Greste, always appreciate you taking the time to share your insights. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.